3, 2, 1. What is happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Here the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameDay.com. We are here on a fantastic and beautiful Thursday evening here in Tallahassee. Nate's over there, and Bradenton will be soon joined by Dustin. He's doing his makeup, so he's taking a little bit of time. But we're here on a wonderful, wonderful, fun, and thrilling week. We're getting closer to football season because we've already got people in the chat. The views on the sites are going crazy, and we were able to break some news earlier today. So, Nate, how we doing? Got a pretty fun week. A lot to talk about.
Yeah, we got Miami fans already in the chat, yapping their gums. Season's coming pretty quickly, but there's a lot to talk about, and I think we all know what the topic of the discussion is. Other than landing Keldric Faulk, but everyone wants to talk about realignment. So it's going to be a very interesting couple weeks or months and how this all unfolds.
Yep. Nope. Obviously, the big news of the week is all of this conference realignment across the board for a ton of programs, including a lot in the ACC with Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and others. We will get into that discussion a little bit as we put out a piece earlier today regarding that, and then also a little bit of ACC and the Pac-12 and their idea for a partnership. We'll give our thoughts and have a good discussion on that one too, if we all agree if that's going to work. And then we're going to talk some recruiting to start off with. Let's go and jump into some recruiting real quick so we can get into all of that fun conference stuff and some things that we're hearing. Florida State had some good news earlier this week with 4-star defensive end Keldric Faulk committing to Florida State over Clemson, Auburn, and Florida. 6'5", 240 pounds. Florida State's able to grab Faulk. Coach Papp really involved here with this recruitment along with others on staff. But what a big-time pickup for Florida State on defense, loading up in that defensive ends room, because you like what you see, Nate. You've been very boisterous on Twitter about the future of Florida State's defensive line, specifically at the end position with Lamont Green Jr. too. How do you feel about this pickup and just the future that they're continuing to build, and not even really the trenches, but a defensive line as a whole? The future is bright.
I agree. Alex Atkins has gotten a lot of publicity, which he's deserved, but Odell and JP have done a great job, recruiting that defensive front four. I think landing Faulk is a huge feather in the cap of JP and the staff. When you go head-to-head with Auburn, Florida, Clemson, those were legitimate options for Faulk. And, Florida State was able to make the connection, was able to, hit a home run. And, when you pair him up with Lamont Green Jr., who I think is going to, as I've said numerous times, is going to end up a top 75 recruit. There's two defensive ends that are going to be just phenomenal for Florida State, and even include the JUCO Jaden Jones, who has a lot of untapped potential. But Faulk has great size, great movement ability. He can stuff the run, but he can also get to the quarterback. So where Lamont Green is your pass rusher, Faulk is your setting the end and stopping the run, but he's a better pass rusher than people think. So I'm super excited about getting him, because they beat good programs for a top 100 kid.
I'm trying to remember how many tackles for losses his junior season. 30 plus. Dude can get after the quarterback or anybody in the backfield.
It was 30 plus. So, he just makes it happen, man. You put on his film, man. He dominates. I know he's from small town, and a couple of people will make comments about small town football, but the kid dominates his competition, man. And you can't teach 6'5", 250, and you can't teach the athletic ability that he has. So, it's a big feather in the cap for the staff.
Yeah, huge commitment for Florida State to land Keldric Faulk over Auburn and Clemson. especially, Auburn being the in-state school, Clemson being a program.
Where's your mic at, bud? Well, we can hear you, but I don't think the mic's near you. There we go.
Big commitment for Florida State to land Keldric Faulk over Auburn and Clemson, especially with Auburn being the in-state school, Clemson being a program, a high-profile program that has been pushing for him for a while. But, I mean, really, for this one, I think you've got to give the credit to senior offensive analyst Austin Tucker, who ever since COVID hit, he started developing a relationship with Keldric Faulk, so really about 2 years now. And they spent a lot of time communicating with each other throughout the last 2 years. Every time he comes up to Tallahassee, him and his family are right there alongside Coach Tucker. And then JP came in along with Coach Norvell and got this one closed out in the end. And, last couple of weeks, Florida State landed another trench player, Roderick Kearney, who became the top-ranked player in Tribe 23. Now Keldric, another guy in the trenches, and he is now your top-ranked player in the class. So a really couple nice weeks for Florida State on both sides of that front.
You mentioned relationships, and, it paid off with Faulk, paid off with Kearney. Hopefully it pays off with Simmons. And that's why I think that, linebacker Blake Nicholson's a legitimate option because of the way that, Coach Shannon, Norvell, and the staff have recruited him and the way they've built the connection. So, hearing a lot of it from these commitments now about how the staff is building bonds. So that's something to watch for, as you have Simmons coming up, you have Nicholson at some time by the end of the month, some others coming up. So there's a lot of it's going to be a busy month for Florida State recruiting. So, if those relationships can, hold tight and hold true, Florida State's going to climb the rankings very quickly.
Yeah, and just sticking with that defensive line, now 4 of your 10 commits are on the defensive line. I think you named them all earlier, Nate, except for maybe KJ Sampson. So Florida State, they've already got 3 defensive ends committed. They've got 1 interior lineman committed, also pushing pretty hard for Jordan Hall. So they're probably a commitment or 2 from being done completely with the defensive line in Tribe 23 this summer. So,
and hold on to what you have. Jones, Green, Faulk. Mm-hmm. Hold on to Sampson. If they land Gatson and Jordan Hall, you're hard pressed to find a better defensive line in the country in terms of this recruiting class. And that says a lot because a lot of people are knocking Odell and JP for the recruiting ability, but they bring that class in. That is no worse than top 3 in the country.
Yeah, and you're right there on the other side of the ball with Kearney and maybe Lucas Simmons and Chester. We'll see how things play out for those 2 guys. But, I mean, it could be a heck of a haul both ways for Florida State on those trenches. And, really that's the way you build a team. It all starts up front, and Florida State, they've gone at it to flip both of those rooms.
Yep.
Big time. Navy Noel from YouTube is asking, what's the deal with linebacker recruiting? There's a big concern here. Nate, were you saying something last week that this upcoming class isn't so impressive in the linebacker room?
I don't personally. I don't feel that this is a stellar linebacker class. It's very top heavy. Their staff is looking for guys who can run, cover. When you run a 4.25, you need guys that can, hit the run fits, but also cover. And that's a certain kind of linebacker they're looking for. I'm writing an article here coming up. A guy like Stanquan Clark, who's down from Miami Killian. I do wonder why Florida State's not all over this kid. All-state Miami linebacker. Those guys traditionally pan out. But you look at a guy like Blake Nicholson, who, is a 2-way player. But if you watch him play, man, he can run really well, and that's what DeMarco Ward does. He runs track, yeah, and we had Bracey on here talking about football versus track speed. DeMarco Ward, I know he was just a 3-star, was not rated when he committed. They like the way he fits. I think that, they had linebackers that were in town over summer, guys that were at camps, and they just didn't like what they saw. So, it's interesting to see what happens as the year goes and how much they want to take. But I don't think it's a great year for linebackers. So, some people were upset about, the Harris twins and them choosing UCF, but you had two guys who are undersized. Each of them are 185, 190. That's an undersized linebacker. And Florida State needs guys that can come in and play right away, because you lose Bethune. You lose maybe Gainer this year, Deloach, who may test the NFL water. So we'll see what happens, but not a great class.
Yeah, I do think it's a little bit of a concern, but it's mitigated by the fact that Florida State plays a 4-2-5. So the majority of the time, you're only going to have two linebackers on the field. At the same time, I would love to see Florida State be in the running for some higher caliber linebackers. A guy like Troy Bowles out of Jesuit comes to mind, and there's a couple others at IMG that have passed up Florida State for whatever reason. But we'll see how it shakes out. Randy is still getting his footing, and he does have some deep recruiting ties throughout the state, and hopefully at some point they begin to flourish.
Yeah, and by me saying that, there is concern, but I think they have to be kind of picky. But I mentioned Stanquan Clark because the guy had 140 tackles last year. He's just a very kind of reminiscent of Omar Graham. He just gets after it, and he kind of fits what a linebacker is. And what Florida State's kind of always had. You mentioned Bowles. He's one of my favorite players in the class period. Just no traction. Looks like he's heading to Georgia. Yeah. So, that guy's a tremendous linebacker, but just can't get in on that recruitment. So we'll see how it plays out, man. They need two in the class. They land Nicholson and Ward. I think they're happy with what they have.
And it's the same thing. Sorry, Logan. It's kind of the same thing with the tight end room, because you're struggling with quality bodies over there, and you lost your lone commit and Randy Pittman. You don't have traction with a lot of quality players. I mean, there's some under the radar guys like Anthony Richardson or Skylar Mann. So maybe they revisit Javante Connor, the former UCF commit who picked up an offer from FSU this offseason. But that's another room. I mean, you're just kind of puzzling.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the question, do they want to take a tight end with what they have on the roster? Do they feel good with what they have moving forward? But I don't disagree. But, just for the sake of conversation, we don't have the chance to look at their board and really what they want to take. So, with a possible smaller class, you got to be careful with what you take, and it's very evident they're trench focused this year.
Most certainly. And then going back to now, Florida State losing out on a commit, 4-star defensive back Avery Stewart ends up picking Kentucky for Florida State. This one was an interesting situation because it felt like for a little while in the early parts there, Florida State had the momentum to land Stewart out of Alabama, but then it goes over to Kentucky with Stoops. What's the maybe happened here at the end of this recruitment for Florida State to lose out on a talented defensive back?
NIL. That's what it comes down to.
No point in getting in bidding wars in July.
Correct.
Because
he's a good player.
Yep. They come back to bite you in December.
Yep. Good player. I like him as a safety prospect, but Kentucky. People need to relax on. Oh, it's Kentucky. Kentucky's done a tremendous job of turning that program around. Everyone wants Mark Stoops, but then when they mention Kentucky over FSU, which side of the coin are you on? Do you want Stoops as the next head coach, or is it because it's just Kentucky? Stoops has always been a great recruiter of defensive backs. He's always been a tremendous coach of DBs. So you can't knock you have to look at the coach. Don't knock the program. Look at the coach. So, Kentucky did a great job recruiting him. They were there longer than Florida State. Florida State came on really heavy at the end, and allegedly, he committed on his visit or soon after. So, the staff felt great because they felt they wrapped it up.
Yeah, I don't see too much of the complaining either for the position group too for Florida State, as if that's exactly what Florida State does. They're always going to bring in talent at the defensive back room. That's always going to be a thing. So either you pick one or you don't. The next one now up for Florida State on deck to keep a really close eye out on. As of just recently, Keldric Faulk yesterday announced the day and time.
You mean Lucas Simmons?
Lucas Simmons. Sorry, I was trying to block out the noise. But yes, Lucas Simmons, big time offensive tackle, target for Coach Atkins in Florida State, is going to be committing on Monday. This is a big time target for Florida State. It's been in the works for a long while now, and it's all going to probably come down to Coach Atkins and the ties there and the family feel. Simmons has told y'all a few times that it does come down to family and where he feels the natural fit is. And it seems like Florida State has a pretty good leadway on this. We'll see. There's other guys like USC here involved, which might be the top one. Tennessee kind of don't feel like maybe they're in it as much. And then there's Florida, but it seems like maybe it's going to come down to Florida State and the West Coast team, two different coasts. Which way does Simmons go is going to be the real question.
Yeah, I think Nate said it earlier, but for this one for Florida State, you're hoping once again the relationship wins out. Seminoles have been recruiting Simmons ever since he lived in Sweden, and Atkins has been building that relationship ever since. And one thing that he told me, I think I said it on the last podcast, that stood out during his official visit was he came in for his meeting with Coach Atkins. They sat him down and they put on a film from Florida State's first mega camp last year. And it showed Simmons going through the drills, and he was making some mistakes, not doing some reps correctly. And then it showed Atkins working with him, making those corrections, and then Simmons going back through the drills and completing stuff correctly. So that just put everything into perspective with him. I mean, that relationship has been there for the long haul. And at the same time, he's pretty close with Norvell as well. Florida State was one of 3 schools to get both of his parents on campus for his official visits, along with USC and Florida. So they're right there in the running. And we reported last night, the Tennessee side, we've heard that Tennessee feels it's between them and Florida State. And they think Florida State has the edge. And from the FSU side, we've heard that they feel good about where things stand with Simmons going into Monday. I traded a couple texts with Lucas last night, and he told me that he hasn't informed a coaching staff yet of a decision, and that he hasn't personally made a decision yet. So he's still in that process, and I would assume that coaches would probably get informed over the weekend or closer to that decision day.
As I said last week, he is probably 1 or 2 in terms of the most important recruits in this class. So, being able to land a top 5 on your board recruit this early in the process, is great for the program. Florida State's done a tremendous job, as Dustin has said, back-to-back weeks. They've been, recruiting this kid for a while. It comes down to where he wants to be. Does he want to be in Florida? Does he want to be in Knoxville? Or does he want to be in LA? So I think that, he doesn't seem like a guy who – I don't think he knows enough about, the history of recruiting and all that stuff. So it's not about USC or tradition. I think it's really about the coaching staff. And that's why I feel good about Florida State. And I think they've done enough, I think they've done enough in proving to him that they can develop him and get him to be a better player. He's been there a ton. You follow the visits. He's been to Florida State so many times. We'll see, man. I feel good. The coaching staff, I think, is confident. I think they feel really good about how they pitch their recruitment to him, and the connection with not only him but his family. So there's a lot going in Florida State's favor, It comes down to where he wants to play, and that's going to be it.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be Florida State, but we'll see.
Got to go ahead and get it out there because we're not going to have another podcast before Monday. So,
yeah, I was about to say we won't have one. We'll know by this time next week.
I'm leading Florida State. I'm leading Florida State as well. Simmons said it himself. Florida State got that final official visit because of that bond and the effort that they put into his recruitment since day one. And I don't think any other program has a bond as deep with him as Florida State does. So yeah, I'm feeling good. Atkins gonna get another one,
and especially for being newer to the sport and to the I'm assuming the parents and him they want to trust the coaches, so that might be a soft factor, but I think it's a factor. And someone popped up about playmakers. You want to talk about Jaylen Brown or
Jesus Christ. But Nate, to your credit, Lucas said as much when I got to interview him after his official visit. He said that he had told his parents so much about Florida State and what he thought about the experiences and the coaches. And then finally, for the first time, they both got to come with him and experience it for themselves. And they felt the same way. They thought it was a tremendous program. The coaching staff was genuine. They really enjoyed meeting with Atkins and being in the meeting with Norvell and Simmons. So Florida State, they nailed it on both fronts during that official visit. I think they've done as good a job as they could throughout the last year plus on Lucas, and we'll see if it all comes to fruition on Monday.
And that's a quote that is, I think I said it on here, or maybe it's just between us. I thought he gave a great interview after his visit to FSU, and I thought he gave some pretty solid insight to his thoughts on Florida State. And that was a quote that kind of stayed with me, was the fact that he's talked about Florida State so much and his parents got the validation of what he has felt and saw. So, those things traditionally work out well, when a decision needs to be made.
Family ties there. And Coach Atkins has done a fantastic job on that front with families and moms and dads. Let's see what happens again on Monday for Lucas Simmons. We'll have full coverage on that commitment day. Doak FSU from YouTube is asking, what's going on with the lack of skill players committing to Florida State? I know it's early, but man, are they all waiting to see our product? You might have given the answer there. You might have just given it.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
I was just going to say, can I interest you in Vondravius Jacobs and Goldie Lawrence?
So I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that Jacobs ends up on offense in college. I could see him playing corner in college. That's something that I possibly would like to see. They're recruiting a ton of skill players. I know they haven't had any kids commit yet. Jaylen Brown's making his announcement here this week, right? On the 7th?
Tomorrow.
Yep. I expect that to be LSU, but that recruitment's far from over. The kid's going to take visits. I don't think that recruitment is any close to being wrapped up. Hakeem Williams, they've done a tremendous job recruiting him. Florida State, to some, is the leader there for a guy who I think develops into wide receiver 1 by the end of the year in the state of Florida, which is, if you followed, I've been a huge Jaylen Brown fan for a year and a half. I like Brandon Inus. Inus has the strongest hands I've ever felt when a recruit shakes your hands. And when I shook his hand at that elite camp, man, he has a great grip. So he's gonna do really well in college. You pay attention to those things when you get older, Dustin.
It's been 4 months since you touched his hand, man.
He had a great.
That was in March.
He has strong hands, man. But we get an announcement from Smothers here, and I think that goes Oklahoma. You have Singleton, who I think is going to be Florida State. You had the wide receiver from Louisiana, who they
Sampson.
they feel very good about right now, coming off the official visit they had with him. But I do think that it's a show me right now. I think these guys want to wait and see how things unfold on offense, which I completely can understand. Florida State's built the trenches now. If they can get the playmakers, they're cooking with grease. But there's legit options. Hakeem, Jalen Brown recruitment's not over. I think Foles is still a legitimate option. There's a lot of guys still out there. I think that we won't have an answer until we see how this team plays.
Yeah, and also when it comes to Hakeem and Sampson, they've already said that they're probably not going to commit until following their senior season. So that just really comes down to the announcement timeline. And as for the running back room, I think it's just that there's a lack of options. Florida State, they're obviously their eyes are set on Dalen Smothers and Samuel Singleton. We'll see if they're able to turn things around with Smothers before he decides next week. And Singleton was another guy coming into his official visit. He said that he had plans to not announce a commitment until following his senior season. And then coming out of the visit, he said it went so well that he was thinking about moving that announcement up. So we'll see what he decides to do. We talked about tight ends a couple minutes ago, and I kind of feel the same way about the defensive backboard. It's a little slim at the moment, and a lot of the guys at FSU are involved with outside of Stewart. It looks like they're probably not going to announce till more towards the fall.
And I think a guy like Smothers probably holds off on his announcement if he wasn't, suspended for his senior season for archaic rules in North Carolina about transferring. So I think he bumped up his commitment because of, he's not going to play his senior year. And Florida State did a great job recruiting him too. Sometimes you just get beat. Oklahoma has a lot to offer. But Florida State did a great job with him. So nothing to be really ashamed about with that one. But
let's get into some of this conference talk, because that's obviously where I think most of people are here now. I know there's some good momentum on the recruiting front for Florida State, but there could be even some bigger changes in the fold for Florida State with a lot of the news coming this week, a little bit of last week, with what now the ACC is going to do to combat all of these other conferences, mainly SEC, Big Ten, with grabbing all these premier teams and adding on to building these mega conferences, which it seems to be like two mega ones later on down the road. Let's start off with the first report that was given earlier this week from Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports, saying that the ACC and the Pac-12 are exploring the possibility of teaming up. Both of these conferences joining hand in hand. The proposal is a loose partnership that would include regular season matchups and a possible championship game. First off, before we go deep dive into this report and the idea of this, does it make sense for you guys, just, I think for every FSU fan, any fan in this conference, does it make sense to partner over with a conference that's on the whole entire other side of the country? Or does this feel like this is desperate measures, got to do what you got to do to stay afloat kind of thing? And this was supposedly first presented by the ACC to the Pac-12.
My opinion is that this is after we get rated by the SEC or Big Ten, we need to pick up the pieces, and what's left of the Pac-12, let's go ahead and join forces and try to be a fourth major conference. I don't think that necessarily would include a Florida State. I think that's a after the fact kind of relationship. I think it's kind of stupid to have to go across country. I think that that plays into the favor of the home team every week, having to travel thousands of miles every week. I'm more of a geographical fan of conferences. That's the old school in me. But no, I think that report by Dennis Stout was more about, what can the ACC do to remain relevant after they lose X amount of teams.
Yeah, it's just really the only way that the ACC and Pac-12 have any chance to try and combat what the Big Ten and SEC are building towards, which are two mega conferences. And the reported numbers for the new TV deals for the SEC and Big Ten are jumping up to around $100 million annually per program, which is pretty insane. One of the numbers I read earlier this week was programs in the Pac-12 were valued around $43 million or so annually each prior to USC and UCLA departing from the conference, and that valuation has dropped to about $30 million, so about a 25% loss. And Florida State on the other side in the SEC, I mean, that's about a 50% less revenue gap compared to the SEC and Big Ten. So, I mean, even if they were to try and do some type of partnership or whatever, it's still not even it's not gonna pale in comparison to what those other programs are getting.
I'm kind of surprised that Stanford is kind of being swept aside because all of their sports are great. They year in, year out have competitive sports across every kind, whether it's softball, football, that's a great brand. I'm surprised that, it's just UCLA and USC. I'm surprised that Stanford is not a part of that move. I think they eventually get picked up by the Big Ten, but no, I don't think they're going to be an after the fact part of ACC, Pac-12, bottom barrel, pick at the pieces kind of conference.
I'm going to read a little bit more into this report here from Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports. And here says the Pac-12 discussing a loose partnership with another conference Tuesday afternoon, noting some regular season crossover games could be played in addition to the end quote championship game. Sources indicate the proposal is viewed as a strength in numbers move. While the 24 combined ACC and Pac-12 teams wouldn't have nearly the clout, and it's crazy now that clout is, I guess, really a word that we use now regularly in journalism. But here we are, it's 2022, but they don't nearly have the clout of the 32 programs combined in the SEC and Big Ten. It would be something to combat the growing financial gap between those burgeoning super conferences and everyone else.
Well, so, who was it that put out there about Florida State and just the numbers they do? Florida State's down, but they still rake in the views for ESPN. They're still national. People watch them, and whether people like it or not, that's what's they're gonna end up in one of these two conferences. I hope it's the SEC because again, I like geographical conferences. But Florida State has a lot of national recognition. I think just the improvements of the women's sports helps them. Basketball, the improvement there, and it's an overall university now.
Well, it feels like with this report too, feels like another thing where remember the alliance that they were all going to build the ACC. They were all going to build.
That was a joke.
Pac-12, Big Ten, and then nope, that's just not happening anymore. Bye. See you. Nice knowing you. We're going to go ahead and leave that alliance. So now it's just down to two conferences here trying to hold on for.
Let's be real. That was over when Texas and Oklahoma announced they're going to SEC. You can announce any kind of alliance, but that was a power move by SEC. And like Dustin said, the Big Ten and the SEC are 1 and 2 or have been 1 and 2 in terms of revenue.
Oh yeah,
and it's not close. And those two conferences have said, all right, let's go. One of us is going to be one, one's going to be two. So that Texas and Oklahoma, I think we'll look back 15 years and say, oh shit, those two programs are what started this whole realignment.
And when they renegotiate those media deals, the Big Ten with Fox, the SEC with ESPN, I mean, the astronomical payouts. It's just going to be something. Whoever's not in one of those two conferences, maybe unless you're Notre Dame, you're just not going to be able to compete with it.
No, the money is way too much. Here's a little chart here that was inside the Discord today. Make sure you guys go join down in the description below.
That's ridiculous, man.
But here's
how much
the
would
numbers.
118 million help Florida State per year?
I think they'd find some money for their football only facility and not have to get on their knees for the Spanx lady. But these numbers are crazy. I mean, if you're looking now at 2022, Florida State projected, or the ACC at $30.9 million, and then a decent increase there in 2025. But if you look at the SEC and what they're going to be doing over the next 3, 4, definitely 5 years, it's absolutely ridiculous. The jump that they're going to have.
Yeah, Florida State cannot compete being in that bottom number.
It's just not possible. I don't care who you are.
Even Clemson.
Money wins.
Yeah, even Clemson is going to fall back. So, I'm all about it. I don't care. Again, I hope it's the SEC. If it's a Big Ten, so be it. Those two numbers would be tremendous for Florida State. I know as a fan, everyone's griping and moaning about wins and losses. Florida State, I think, would get back pretty quickly, with that kind of money available.
Mm-hmm. And I want to go over now to a piece that we put out earlier today. Per some of our sources, we're able to bring in quite a bit of info, dialed into it for since about Monday, trying to gather in some information on what Florida State's stance is on this. We're able to talk to a few people and put a piece together out for you guys. We'll put it in the chat here in a minute. But Florida State is indeed, exploring leaving the ACC for a new conference. And it really is, like we just talked about, the Big Ten and the SEC here. From what we were told, these talks have been going on since last summer. Nothing's ever going to become public out of this, just to, make sure everybody knows that nothing's ever going to become public. But per sources, the talks have been going on since last summer between Florida State. You've got the SEC, which now is heavily after some programs, and then you got the Big Ten too. The problem with the Big Ten, you've got the AAU there with academics going on. The SEC does not want the Big Ten to come in and grab some of these Southeast colleges. Definitely teams like Florida State, Clemson, even Miami, but even Virginia Tech, Virginia. If there's any way, shape, or form the SEC can hold off on the Big Ten doing that, they will do that. And a lot of it is going to come down to media rights and all of the kind of contracts that goes on behind the scenes that, I think FSU fans are wondering, how does FSU get out of this? And we got a pretty good explanation over the last couple of days on how that could unfold. I know, D-Lou, you put out a piece earlier today kind of describing and giving the different methods of how this could concur or on-go. I don't know how to really place it because it's all over the place.
I think the first thing that we should talk about, because I keep seeing everyone say it in the chat, is the grant of rights agreement. And obviously Florida State, the ACC, is locked into that agreement until 2036. In 2013, every school signed a deal to surrender their media rights, and the original date to expire was June 30th, 2027. And then in 2016, they increased that for 9 more years to get more television revenue and to get the ACC network finally up and running. But basically, the grant of rights is executed based on ESPN's agreement with the ACC. So, for instance, if new teams are added to the conference, if the ACC was to merger with the Pac-12 or bring in a program from the Pac-12, the current grant of rights would be invalidated.
Mm-hmm.
So in that same scenario, ACC, they would have to create a new grant of rights. And in that instance, Florida State would be able to leave freely for another conference. And ESPN itself has a lot of power here. Technically, they could reverse course on their deal with the ACC, considering they're kind of aligned with the SEC. depending on if those profit margins outweigh the cost of abandoning that deal with the ACC, and with the numbers that we've seen, they probably will. So there is a way for Florida State to circumvent that, and they might have an example to go off of, because it sounds like the SEC is trying to move up the date to get Oklahoma and Texas in as soon as 2023.
Long story short, there's a way out, and I think that has been long ironed out. That was probably one of the first things that was addressed. How do we get out of this? What's the fine print? What's the legalities? How do we get out of this at minimal cost? So the fact that the whole country, multiple conferences or the realignments all over the place, I would think that there's a 50-50 shot that FSU gets out of that deal freely.
Plus, you get your top lawyers on that, and I'm sure they'll be able to find some type of clause or something in the language to circumvent it. Either way,
worst comes to worst, you negotiate a deal, you make $117 million a year, and you pay it off until you pay them the money back. So there's a way out.
Yeah, but either way, I think Florida State, they will have a precedent to follow. The SEC, they're trying to react to this move of the Big Ten adding USC and UCLA, which will be in 2024. They want to try and leapfrog that to go ahead and get their expansion started with Oklahoma and Texas in 2023. And right now, that the current agreement is for those two programs to join the SEC in 2025, which would be a year after the Big Ten expands. So that means that they would have to figure out a way to get out of the Big 12 grant of rights to make that happen. So we'll just have to see how that process goes, and if the SEC is really about it, which they prove they are, and they have the money to go make it happen if they really want to.
I think out of the both those conferences, at Florida State, is in talks here with both of them, I lean towards more SEC. It makes most sense geographically, and the matchups are beautiful. And don't get me wrong there. I mean, you're going to see a packed house crowd if you have a Tennessee coming in and playing Florida State and Doak. An LSU, you go to play LSU home and home series. It just makes sense to where you're not traveling off, and like the AAU still comes in hand too for if your Florida State's going to be, maybe, messing around with the Big Ten. That also plays in a part in it too. Pretty big part. It kind of hurts it there. So it just depends on what Florida State wants to end up, doing. But I think the SEC, like D-Lou said, they've proven that they can make some moves, and they've got the money and the budget to do these kind of things. But you got to find a little way out. But, if you go back to now the ACC and the Pac-12 and that partnership situation, if that ends up being a thing, I personally don't see any of that happening. But if it does end up coming into fruition, you don't want to be a Florida State fan holding on to a partnership or whatever the hell it is with the Pac-12. You don't want anything to do with that. And I think that's what a lot of these top tier ACC teams like Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, Miami, they're trying to not be a part of that. And, maybe the athletic directors over there are also having these same type of conversations that Florida State is having in-house. You just can't be along for the ride with that. And, it sucks. It is what it is. But I think most Florida State fans too have been really wanting to get out of the ACC. I know some fans don't want to do the SEC chants whatsoever, but once they see the money that would be coming in for Florida State's programs, I think they would be fine with doing a few SEC chants in Doak.
I would not do an SEC chant in Doak. I don't care about the other teams. I just want Florida State to stay relevant, to stay competitive.
Are you doing an ACC chant?
No. I hope.
Which one would you rather do more?
Neither. I hope every team Florida State plays goes 0-12. I don't care about the other programs. I care about Florida State. And, the writing's on the wall at some form or fashion. It'll be announced FSU is leaving the ACC at some point. We just got to sit back and wait for it to be the Big 12 conference. No, Pac-12 conference? Nope. The Mount West Conference? Nope. It's going to be it's going to be SEC or Big Ten, and going from
There's
there.
no in between.
No. And I hope Miami gets left out.
Miami gets left.
Well,
that would be hilarious.
We'll watch on ESPN 7 the ACC Pac-12 championship, Oregon State versus Miami.
Yeah, that would be exhilarating.
Mike played in Provo.
Yeah, Mike Bianchi. Am I saying that right? Bianchi. Y'all know who that is, right?
Yeah, Mike Bianchi.
Columnist.
Yeah, Mike Bianchi.
Writer. What'd you say?
Bianchi.
It's just Logan goes Bianchi and Nate's like Bianchi.
Is it Bianchi?
Like, Nate might be saying it right.
He might be. I'm thinking
Mike Bianchi from
I'm thinking,
Orlando Sentinel. Don't even talk about his article about. Sorry guys, Virginia guys. The guy is completely all about like shock and awe. His article.
No. He put out a piece. He put out a piece 20 minutes ago. He says, "I hate to be the bearer of bad news for fans of the Canes, FSU, and Clemson.
Yeah,
but North Carolina,
Virginia, or Carolina. Yeah,
North Carolina will be the ACC's prime target if the SEC and Big Ten come a calling."
Yeah, he's an idiot.
Yeah, you might be onto something there.
He's an idiot. Why people even discuss what he talks about and writes about? Still. He's a known Florida State hater. He's a Florida fan.
I don't also trust anybody that follows 48,000 people on Twitter. That should be an automatic red sign.
He follows me.
Wow. You're one of the 48,000 that he's following. So at some point, your name's going to pop up on the timeline and he just immediately hits follow. I don't agree.
Let's go back to our report. I know we've talked about the SEC a little bit, but let's talk about Florida State to the Big Ten, because the interesting thing that we were able to learn is that the Big Ten is considering a concession to offer Florida State membership to the conference, despite the fact that they're not a member of the Association of American Universities, the AAU. And basically, I'll break it down real quick. The AAU is a group of American universities who transform lives through education, research, and innovation. According to their website, the AAU receives most of the federal funding for research that will improve public health and contribute to the country's economic strength. Blah, blah, blah. In order for schools to be considered, the universities have to pass 2 phases of indicators with requirements ranging from memberships in national academies, such as National Academies of Science and Engineering, and the number of research and scholarship PhDs approved every year. And that is per one of our Sports Illustrated sites, Wildcats Daily. So
that sounds great, but we're talking about football.
But
when
basically,
it comes down to it,
let me finish. Basically, that's important because 13 of the 14 programs that are currently in the Big Ten are affiliated with the AAU. Nebraska is the only one that isn't, and they were previously a part of it. And you look at UCLA and USC coming in, they're also a part of the AAU. So the Big Ten, outside of football, they also put a big standard when it comes to academics. So it's very interesting that they would potentially bend a pretty imperative rule that they've had for a long time to get Florida State in the conference.
Where's Florida State right now in terms of national colleges? Aren't they amongst the top 30?
I could not tell you. It's more of the amount of research funding that they're bringing in per year, which I think that they're still on the lower end of that. They've been improving in those standings, but they're not at the level where some of those institutions that have been around since the
1800s.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I was about to say. Florida State's also,
exactly
exponentially younger as a school versus, Ohio State, Michigan, USC, Stanford, hundreds of years younger. So, whatever.
You nailed it.
I'm going to put a poll here inside of the YouTube chat and see which conference they would like to pick, because I see a few people saying Big Ten in here too, but we got over almost 150 on the YouTube page right now. I want to see how people really feel.
I want Florida State, Georgia. I want Florida State, LSU. Yeah, those are the matchups I want to watch. I'm not interested in Florida State versus Iowa.
I don't want to travel to Iowa.
I can see it both ways. I think the SEC, it obviously brings you closer to a lot of programs that are right in the area for Florida State, and they would make for some interesting matchups. But then you look over at the Big Ten and the opportunity to potentially improve the university outside of football, to continue bulking up the academics. And you look at the new president, Dr. Richard McCullough, that's something that he's placed a big emphasis on. So it's very interesting that we were able to uncover that the Big Ten is exploring that possibility. And you would think that's something that would appeal to the higher ups at Florida State.
Our YouTube guy
Thank you, Go Noles.
Yeah, he says, giving us some info here, 55th overall academic institution for Florida State and a top 20 public school academically. I remember seeing the banners out when I was on campus, when I used to go to classes.
I think we all have our preference, but I think that all three of us, and I'm sure, Austin's not here, I think either one of the two, in order to stay competitive, I think we'd be happy. Not to speak for you guys, but I don't care. I want SEC, but if it's Big Ten, so be it. That's what it comes down to.
I would say, money. Whoever is going to offer the most money, I think no FSU fan will really complain there. But if we have a preferred one, I think all of us are on the SEC side here. I mean, it's a lot. But
doesn't it kind of make sense? ACC, ESPN involvement. It kind of seems like it'd be more of a natural transition over to the SEC with the ESPN instead of Fox. It just seems like it's more of a natural, organic transition.
You wouldn't be changing much, at least national television wise.
It'd be fun to have Gus Johnson calling games, though.
Like you said, Nate, ESPN, they've got a lot of power here with that deal with the SEC. Obviously, we talked about earlier how they could kind of nullify the ACC's grant of rights agreement if they wanted to go down that path. But one thing that we were also told in this report, considering the SEC's massive deal with ESPN, the source is they believe that the ACC's grant of rights will only be invalidated if premier programs such as Florida State agree to join the SEC instead of the Big Ten. So there might be a more viable path for Florida State to get into the SEC rather than the Big Ten.
That's kind of my point. ESPN can kind of be like, hey, come over here. You got to worry about that, that grant of rights. You come over here, but if you go over to the Big Ten, you're going to pay up.
Got you in purgatory. They're like, all right, wait till 2036 then.
Yep.
Yeah. No, for a majority of the votes here tonight, it's going 82% to the SEC for preferred conference if Florida State were to leave the ACC. So ACC, not much of a shocker there at all. That's for sure. I
think we could do a whole podcast on the impact of recruiting, just with the name of the conference.
There's a lot of content to be done if there does indeed be a conference change. I'm already thinking of the web of different things, both pieces wise and on here. It would be nonstop of stuff. So I'm not saying that I would like to have something happen soon, but you know what? We still got a little while till fall camp. So give me everything you got, baby. Give me everything. Leak it all, please. Leak it all.
I think it's going to act pretty quick because I think it's an arms race right now between the two conferences. I'm not saying next week or the end of the month, but I think within the next few months, maybe sometime during the season, I think we hear something. But even if it's more substantiated or hey, this is what is going to unfold after the season, I think we're going to hear something at some point within the next 3 months.
Yeah.
Let's make it happen.
that TV deal money, those facility upgrades, they'll be done tomorrow night. You want the best. You want the best. I guess they got a baseball and softball coach. I don't know who else. You want the best replacement you can find for Leonard Hamilton. You will get him.
Yeah,
they can buy out that
new
James Gay
uniforms.
There's a lot of investments that Florida State is going to be making in other sports. They're making upgrades to the softball arena. They're going to have to do a lot with the new baseball program around Link to really improve the facilities as well. And a move like this, I mean, it gets you the funding to make all those things possible.
Yep. If you guys haven't,
does it make sense for Notre Dame to go to the Big Ten?
It does to me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't see why not, but they hold all the cards since they're technically still an independent school.
And they make a crap ton of money off NBC.
I don't believe that there's much holding them as far as the ACC's grant of rights.
Put in the chat here if you guys haven't yet. Make sure you guys go join our Discord. A lot of the guys pumping in some info all throughout the week on there, and it's been rocking right now with all this conference talk. We got over.
Can you pull up Joseph's comment?
Joseph's got a comment, but yeah, if you're on YouTube, go click that Discord link. Go jump in there. The discussion is going very well. Which one is it?
It's up like 7.
Which comment?
Comments.
What's his name again?
Stewart,
Joseph.
801.
There we go.
So FSU isn't even making bowl games in the ACC anymore. So even if they go to the SEC to play tougher competition, they're earning about double the funding, maybe triple the funding than they are right now, which is only going to help them improve in the future. Making this move is going to be what helps get Florida State back with the amount of money they're going to be able to bring in to improve their programs, hire coaches, keep coaches, and I think it could pay off in the NIL world too.
All of that, Dustin, I agree with you, has helped significantly. I think that increases Florida State's comeback. The climb back to relevancy, whatever you want to call it. I think that puts a little bit of gas in the tank, and $117 million can do a lot for a program.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in Florida State's spot, I don't think they're hurting so much in years past financially, and definitely now with Alfred being in charge here and make a lot of moves left and right. But overall, that amount of money for any university changes a lot of things, not only football program, but like y'all were talking about outside of that with different programs with really excellent sports that Florida State has on the outside that could use some extra funding. It just makes sense. And, this conversation is only going to continue into next week and the next week. And God knows if we don't have any kind of answer per se or anything official, then there'll be a big discussion all throughout.
Yeah, and whether it's right or wrong, we can have our opinions about it, but these recruits are bound and determined to play in the SEC right now. Ohio State and they're doing their thing, but a lot of these Southern kids want to play in the SEC, so that helps FSU. But imagine the soccer program with $30 more million. They're already probably the best soccer program in the country now. Softball, that's all gonna. It's going to be interesting to watch how it unfolds. I think Florida State climbs back to the top of the mountain in terms of a program for not just football, but basketball I don't care about. Austin can suffer through that, but it's all about football for me. So
yeah,
I've got a simple saying: adapt or die. You make this move to the SEC or Big Ten, or you were going to fall behind like every other program in the country outside of about 40.
Adapt or perish. Triple H.
What would be y'all's favorite Big Ten home and home series and the SEC home and home? That y'all would actually like to go to.
Ohio State, yeah, but I'd love to go watch a game at Michigan. That'd be a fun stadium to watch. And Georgia, I've always wanted to go watch a game there, or LSU. LSU is my definite top school that I want to watch a game at Death Valley. But Athens would be fun too.
Give me Ohio State and LSU for sure.
Mm-hmm. Nashville, Vanderbilt.
Yeah, there we go. That's exactly where I want to go. Please.
No, but
Ohio State.
Yeah.
Ohio State for me Big Ten wise.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never been to the Big House though, so I wouldn't object that either.
Mm-hmm. Really, either one of those, Michigan or Ohio State for sure, but LSU, Georgia, those atmospheres would be really fun to soak in.
Maybe get a nice little Texas A&M home and home.
Oh, yeah. I don't want to travel to College Station. I've been there before. Not special people. Very not special.
Supposedly they're very much like NC State fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I've lived here in Tallahassee my whole life, and when football season's not here, it does kind of stink a little bit. I mean, you're not far away from the beach, which is nice, but when you go to College Station and you don't have football at all, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to go take care of picking up horse shit at some crap over there with some horses.
Well, it's an agricultural and maintenance school.
That's right.
I'm
not going to pick up horse shit in
College
Town. Maybe, yeah.
You can try out
literally and figuratively. Huh? I could try out for what?
The 12th man. Go get that number 12 jersey,
Yeah, I would love that. That would be my dream come true right there.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Trey Fisher, Jimbo's son, coming here to play quarterback at FAMU. Shout out to little Fisher there.
I don't think that kid ever wanted. I don't think he ever wanted to leave Tallahassee.
Yeah, no. I think he definitely really likes Tallahassee. Mm-hmm. Eddie Goldman too. Just some little quick hitters too to end off the night. Eddie Goldman signed a 1-year deal with the Atlanta Falcons. He's coming down to the Southeast again after his time with the Bears. So shout out to Eddie Goldman getting that 1-year deal. Trying to think anything else NFL wise has really happened. Guys are now getting their last couple of weeks of vacay before training camp starts.
Jameis looks great, man.
Jameis does look good. And I will say I was a little worried during mandatory mini camp with the little limp that he had, and I wasn't entirely sure. And I know a few of the New Orleans outlets. I know a few of the LSU outlets said it's nothing to be worried about. They're warming him up. They're not doing him full force. And
I think that's mental versus anything.
I'm sure.
As someone that's done it 3 times, suffered 3 knee injuries. It's more mental than anything. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fingers crossed everything goes well in the recovery. But trying to think if there's anything else really that has happened. We'll keep a close eye on Lucas Simmons and his commitment that will be happening on Monday. We'll have full coverage on that wherever he ends up deciding to go. This is a big one for FSU, but I think all of us on here are pretty optimistic on FSU side as of Thursday at 8:09. I'm just saying Thursday at 8:09.
It's Monday in Clearwater. I should go cover it.
You said it.
If you can get off work, Logan will send you a stipend.
I'll send you.
I'm on vacation.
Stipend.
So
he lives there.
I don't live in Clearwater. Clearwater's about an hour away. But it'd be worth the drive.
35.
Get him a nice little per diem.
Yeah, come on.
Well, if you send I'll get a StreamYard link. We did it before, Nate. We did it with Nico. Nico's commitment. We might not
give me that hotel room, Logan.
No, you're gonna be staying with Nate. Nate, he doesn't. Nate, Dustin doesn't want to stay with you.
That's fine. I don't want to stay with me. He had bad habits.
Bad habits.
But just keep your eyes on Jaylen Brown committing tomorrow, Lucas Simmons Monday, and Dalen Smothers next Thursday. I believe he'll probably commit before we go live for the show. So we'll see what happens. Florida State, maybe they make – I don't think they're going to get Brown, but maybe they can make a late run at Smothers. And we talked about it for a while earlier, in a good position to come out of things with Simmons.
Well, I think that's going to end it off. I'm going to put in the chat one last time. Make sure you guys are in the Discord. It's free to join. Join 2,000 other FSU fans. Things are heating up, getting ready for the football season. Florida State expecting to get in the groove here. July 27th, nothing official yet, but players will be reporting on the 26th to Florida State and the Moore, and then expected to have practice on the 27th. So things are going to start heating up here. As always, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. Hit the subscribe button down below if you haven't yet, or hit the like button. Either way, we definitely would appreciate it. We're on iTunes too, so if you want to listen to the podcast version, you can. We're also on Spotify, Google Play, everywhere else. But this is Here the Spear, presented by NoleGameDay.com. Hope everybody has a great rest of y'all's weekend, and we will talk to you guys next week on Here the Spear. Adios.
Go Noles.